Please note that the content of this video may contain errors. If you would like to view subtitles, please use the subtitle button on the screen. Now, let's begin our topic, the life of Edmund Andros, colonial governor. Let's learn together about the eventful life of Governor Edmund Andros. Edmund Andros was born in London in 1637. His family has a long history in the English feudal system. Its influence played an important role in many aspects of his life. The Andros family has a long history of success in the military and administrative fields. His father, Sir Lawrence Andros, in particular, was a soldier serving under King Charles I. This background paved the way for Edmund's military career from an early age. As the son of an elite, young Edmund received a proper education. Education placed particular emphasis on languages, history, and geography. These subjects would prove extremely useful in his later role as colonial governor. He also received military and tactical training from a young age. This served as a smooth introduction to military service. Edmund's youth coincided with a time of turmoil in England. Over the course of history, the conflict between royalists and parliamentarians intensified. Edmund's family found themselves caught in the middle of it all. Because Lawrence Andros was a royalist, the English Civil War was a significant event for the family. Inevitably, it influenced Edmund's outlook on life. Also, this period also laid the foundation for his personal activities abroad, in places like Scotland and France. And it could be said that the seeds of his political acumen and military career, which he would later display as colonial governor, were cultivated here. As he grew older, he gradually began to shape his own path. Edmund Andros was first assigned to the military in 1662. He was only 20 years old. At that time, he was assigned his first assignment in the Dutch military. There, he gained important experience learning about the complex political landscape of Europe. The Netherlands was in commercial competition with Britain at the time. It was fateful that Andros's loyalty to the British Crown would be put to the test. His duties in the Netherlands involved managing logistics and leading on the battlefield. This allowed him to develop organizational management skills and strategic judgment. The international perspective he developed in this environment would prove extremely useful in his later colonial rule. He then returned to the British military and served on various battlefields in Europe. In particular, during the Second Anglo-Dutch War and various skirmishes with France in the late 1660s, Andros served on the front lines, assisting the British military in strategic maneuvers. His promotion was rapid. He rose from lieutenant to captain in a short space of time, and the leadership skills he developed there became the driving force behind his future career as a colonial governor. He rose from lieutenant to captain in a short space of time, and the leadership skills he developed there are what? He became the driving force behind what would later become known as the colonial governors. On the other hand, Andros's experience in the military often brought him into conflict. Conflicts with his superiors, in particular, were triggered by his independent thinking and drive. Andros often tried to accomplish missions his own way, and while this attitude sometimes won the hearts of his subordinates, some also viewed him as a threat. Still, his decisiveness and ingenuity gained him many supporters and increased his influence. Perhaps he calculated that this would later prove beneficial in his governance of the colonies. Thus, even in his youth, Edmund Andros grew through many experiences. His military career would later serve as the foundation for overcoming numerous political challenges and play an important role in his life. Edmund Andros's first colonial mission began in New York in the late 17th century. At the time, New York was an important base under the British Empire. It was here that Andros first experienced his duties as a colonial governor. Britain sought to strengthen its governance and stimulate commercial activity in the colonies. This was the primary backdrop for the colonial relationship, which would later become a source of considerable tension. Andros's difficult task would also test his qualifications as a ruler. His work in New York was filled with many challenges. Having arrived in Britain from the Netherlands, the area still retains a strong Dutch influence, both in terms of culture and its inhabitants. He faced the dual challenge of protecting the region's rights while simultaneously establishing British laws and policies. In particular, they were called upon to strike a balance between officials sent from England and traditional local leaders. A balance was needed. Another issue he was forced to confront was his relationship with the native people. Andros sought to promote trade with the native people and achieve peaceful coexistence. This was a complex task that required not only military might, but also diplomatic skill. Through negotiations with the Krieg and Mohawk tribes, he gradually built up the trust of the native people. Internal political issues included the revision of colonial law and tax reform. These measures were necessary to stabilize the colony and facilitate trade, but they met with considerable resistance. Andros skillfully negotiated and implemented these measures. The measures Andros implemented in New York during this period did not simply solidify his rule, they laid the foundations for the society and culture of the American North that would follow. His experiences in New York served as an important test for his later, even greater role. Edmund Andros became governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1686. At that time, King James Roman II of England was strengthening his control over the colonies and planning to unite the New England region. The background to this plan was the creation of a unified organization to counter threats from foreign powers such as France and Spain. The aim was to create a unified organization. Andros played a key role in implementing this plan on the ground. Andros began to work to unite the New England colonies and form the United States of New England. The central aim of this plan was to reconcile the interests of each colony, including Massachusetts Bay, and implement a unified policy, but this was fraught with difficulties. First, local residents and colonial leaders resisted fiercely to protect their autonomy. Puritan residents, in particular, strongly opposed the direct rule of the English government and the Crown. They viewed Andros's legal reforms and taxation as tyrannical and protested at town meetings. Andros's governing policy prioritized the interests of the British mother country, with little regard for the colony's own laws and customs. As a result, the rift with the local residents deepened. Specifically, he dismissed all of the officials he had previously elected and replaced them with ones he appointed himself. This greatly stimulated the residents' sense of self-governance. Andros also could not ignore external pressure. The original plan for a unified New England state would not only affect remote regions, but also, because it would also affect the struggle for supremacy among European nations. In particular, as Louis Roman XIV power in France grew, his influence in North America also grew. The need for further regional integration increased. In addition, political changes in Britain also had an impact. James Roman II policies were repeatedly criticized, ultimately leading to the outbreak of the Glorious Revolution. The impact of this revolution also precariously affected Andros's position. The integration plan itself was headed for failure. Thus, Andros's plan for a united New England state ultimately ran aground, facing complex political conflicts and fierce opposition from various stakeholders. However, his challenge was also a challenge to the colonial system of governance. His challenge was a challenge to the nature of colonial rule. It went down in history as a touchstone for ushering in a new era. Edmund Andros created tensions with the inhabitants of the New England colonies. From the late 1660s to the early 1700s, Andros attempted to restrict local rights. His efforts were not well received by the colonists. The initial source of conflict was over land ownership and taxation. In line with his homeland's policy, Andros demanded new proof of land ownership, but many residents who already owned land vehemently resisted this. To the residents, this was nothing but an infringement of their rights. Andros also attempted to reform the tax collection system, but this move also drew strong opposition from the residents. In particular, the tax reforms Andros attempted to introduce were perceived as a redistribution of tax collecting power. This provoked many colonial leaders as it infringed on existing privileges. Against this backdrop, the local resistance movement gradually became organized. In April 1689, this conflict finally surfaced in the form of a riot. The riots that broke out in Boston were a clear expression of opposition to Andros and his policies. Citizens armed themselves, surrounded Andros's residence, the governor's mansion, and arrested many of his supporters. Calls for the restoration of Benjamin Britten and even existing local governments grew louder. The uprising escalated rapidly, and Andros was arrested and imprisoned for some time. Some accounts suggest that even his defenders were viewed with suspicion and treated equally. The uprising was a major event in the colonies of the British Empire. This incident later became known as the Boston Incident. This incident served as an opportunity to fundamentally re-examine the colony's governance and caused many residents to reaffirm their rights. Interestingly, recent research has suggested that the riots may have been the result of other forces attempting to undermine Andros's policies. There is also a theory that multiple individuals were plotting behind the scenes. Thus, Andros's reign came to a temporary end, but the events that followed foreshadowed new developments. The actions of the colonists were not merely a rebellion, they bore significant implications for the colony's future. In 1689, tensions in New England rose, and the colonists finally rebelled against Andros. The Boston Rebellion was sparked by news of the abdication of James Roman II of England and the accession of Mary Roman II, and William Roman III. The news of Mary Roman II and William Roman III accession to the throne was the trigger. Governor Andros's rule began to falter as expectations for a new king and dissatisfaction with the old regime mixed together. Fearing conflict with the local people, Andros sought help from his former allies, but the situation rapidly worsened. The local people armed themselves and quickly surrounded the governor's palace. Andros had no way out. To ensure his own safety, he chose to submit to arrest without resistance. Interestingly, historical records from the time contain various rumors about this arrest. For example, Andros is said to have attempted to escape in disguise, but failed. It is also said that he hid important documents just before his capture. These casual conversations continued to influence his character and became a symbolic event for the rebellious colonists. Deportation to England was confirmed, and Andros spent several months under house arrest. This period, which would significantly change his life, was both a trial and a time for reflection. He was finally released in 1692. There are differing views on his actions after his release. Debate continues among researchers as to whether his release was due to a pardon or a political decision. Andros once again attracted unwanted attention. Perhaps fate had always been a constant presence in his life. Edmund Andros was arrested as governor of New England in 1688. His subsequent path to public office was a true test of his toughness and political skill. Although his failure in New England brought him unwanted attention, he would later play a different role in the Virginia colony. Not only did he play a key role in his comeback, but another important figure, James Lauder, Baron Fanshawe, was also involved. Lauder was highly trusted by Andros, and his recommendation is believed to have been a key factor in his return to the governorship. This is believed to be the reason he was able to regain his position as governor. This recommendation was deeply connected to the political situation in England and was closely linked to the policies of King William Roman III at the time. It was also closely connected to the policies of William Roman III at the time. After assuming his post as governor of the Virginia colony in 1692, Andros focused his efforts first on rebuilding the economy. He improved the distribution of agricultural products, particularly tobacco, and worked with local residents to stabilize revenues. However, some local aristocrats were skeptical of him as a new ruler. How to resolve this conflict was a major challenge. Furthermore, he was required to improve relations with the Native Americans, putting his diplomatic skills to the test. In this regard, he emphasized negotiation rather than force, seeking to deepen mutual understanding. These efforts bore fruit, and his term as governor was characterized by relative stability. This period is later recognized as the beginning of economic prosperity in the history of the Virginia colony. How he improved the local economy and quelled conflicts with the local residents had a profound impact on future generations. However, this success did not last long, and ultimately, due to a change in policy by William Roman III, he was forced to resign from his position as governor in 1698. After resigning, Andros returned to England, but due to the nature of the position of colonial governor, his life was always full of ups and downs. His role in Virginia went beyond economic reconstruction. He brought a new perspective to colonial governance. In particular, his emphasis on citizen-led political participation and his model of social formation based on economic stability, it is believed to have had a significant influence on the later United States system. After completing his term as governor of the Virginia colony, Edmund Andros, he returned to England in 1698. His return to England was largely due to the political background within England. England at the end of the 17th century was a time of war, dynastic changes, and it was also a turbulent time, marked by rapid economic development. Andros himself, an influential politician, could not remain untouched by these developments. After returning to England, Andros was once again recognized for his administrative skills and held various public offices. He served as Chancellor of Trinity College, where he was involved in education. Some historians suggest that his interest in education was due to his experiences in the colonies. Andros emphasized the importance of citizen-led politics and economic stability during the colonial period. This likely influenced his commitment to education. In 1704, with King William's war continuing, attention shifted to European affairs. At this time, England needed to play a key political and military role in countering the alliance between France and Spain. England needed to play a key role in the war effort. Andros participated in war councils as part of strategic planning, providing advice based on his knowledge and experience. However, such duties at an advanced age are said to have gradually taken their toll on his health. After 1710, Andros gradually retired from public duties and began living a quiet life at his home in Surrey. At the same time, he also managed his real estate and financial assets in England and cherished time with his family. During this period, in stark contrast to his turbulent life in the colonies, he deepened his friendships with friends and old colleagues. Anecdotes that have been passed down as insights into his character. Edmund Andros passed away on February 24, 1714. According to contemporary documents, his funeral was solemn and honored his achievements. Many attendees mourned his passing. Andros's influence extended beyond his position and region, making significant contributions to England itself. Considering the continued influence of his policies and ideas on newly created nations, his presence was enormous. His story transcends the life of a single colonial governor and has become a historic landmark. Let's learn about the complexities of the colonial era from the life of Edmund Andros. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and like it.